A dim ovular vehicle, gently shimmering in reds, greens, and yellows, floated silently down the Hudson River Valley, honing in on the red and green rotating beacon on top of the George Washington Bridge. It hovered briefly over the beacon, merging with its beams. They brightened. Then it looped and glided northeastward, unnoticed by the pair of lovers on Riverside Drive, or by the overnight truckers making their way across the bridge from New Jersey. Slowly it dipped towards the dark, tar-papered roof of a 6-story tenement in Washington Heights. Within minutes, a thin, shimmering figure emerged from the vehicle. At first glance, one might say it was human, with its 2 arms and legs loosely adorned with soft, vibrant, multicolored silks. But it was disproportionately thin for its almost 7 feet, so thin one would expect it to struggle against the swift October winds. Instead, it stood without effort in the shadow of the vehicle, listening. Then it walked slowly toward the edge, stepped out onto a fire escape ladder, and glided down to a 5th-floor window without touching a step. At the same time, 2 other almost identical figures emerged from the vehicle and, turning their heads towards their disappearing comrades, stood perfectly still in the shadow of their craft. Jay held her breath and listened for every tiny sound. Had she fallen asleep by mistake? She must mind protect Mommy. She must stay awake to grab Daddy's mind and put him to sleep before he grabbed at Mommy and gave her those big black bruises. Sometimes his dizzy gasoline stink filled her nose and made her carsick, so she couldn't send her mind into the living room way down the hall. If she could hear him coming, she could sometimes make Mommy not feel before his stink made her too vomity to do that mind-protecting thing. When he did come home early and just went to bed, well, then she would just be able to sleep. But first Mommy had to check the room, under the bed for bears, push the door flat against the wall so nothing could hide behind it, close the shade of the fire escape window because the shadows from the light outside could become bouncing goblins on the walls. So many things to check. Okay, Jay, I checked under the bed. No bears, see? No bears. Now close your eyes. If her sing-song voice had that slight "hurry up already" in it, Jay's throat would tighten. When Mommy's voice sounded like that, there'd be no good-night hug. Sometimes she fell asleep by mistake, and later in the night she would wake up to Mommy crying softly in the bathroom right next to Jay's room. Sometimes she'd brave the bears and tiptoe, can't wake up Daddy, into the bathroom and hold on to Mommy's back, going up and down with her crying. Mommy would be sitting on the bathroom floor next to the tub, her head buried in her arms. She'd just hold Mommy a little bit because Mommy didn't like hugging. And then she'd tiptoe back to bed before Mommy shooed her away. Sometimes Mommy got really mad right away. That was worse. Sometimes she tried sending her mind kisses instead. Other times she'd just squeeze Mommy's crying out of her brain. Now Daddy was coming home late again. If only her lady would come to her now, before he smashed into the apartment. She imagined her lady's strong and loving hand, and placed it on her back. She heard her lady's fairy angel words in her ear. Her loving hand on her back spilled into her throat, a silent, crying ecstasy. She made her lady disappear so that she could make her come to her again. In her head, she made her lady say, "My poor little baby girl, everything's going to be okay now. You'll see." Then she made her lady just hold her tight so she could silently cry herself to sleep in her lady's loving arms. No, a better idea. Maybe she could pretend her lady helps her get onto the fire escape and helps her brave the goblins. And then she could dangle her feet through the bars of the fire escape like she always did during the day. And it would feel so good hanging her legs between the fire escape bars, pee-pee and tummy pressed against the bars real hard, 5 stories up, falling without falling. A good dizzy rushing from her toes to her throat. The night goblins would kill her. That's okay. Mommy and Daddy will really miss her and love her oh so much. And Mommy and Daddy will cry like they did when Bubba died, and love each other again. She won't have to mind protect anymore, ever. She thought up her lady for that one last time. Her lady will make her braver. She put her lady's hand on her back and scooted barefoot past the bears waiting under her bed to grab her ankles, toward the nightmare shadows at the window, very quickly and quietly so Mommy wouldn't hear. She climbed out on the fire escape, sat down, and eased her tushy towards the boards. She pushed each leg out through separate openings until they swayed freely over the alleyway 5 stories down, falling without falling. She shut her eyes to hide from the goblins that were surely creeping toward her. Maybe it was very late or very early because the George Washington bridge trucks were not humming. Perhaps she just didn't hear them. This time, when her cry rippled from her spine into her neck and into her throat, while she was falling without falling from the fire escape, her lady's hand, not Goblin's, felt really warm and strong, like it was stroking, pressing against her back for real. Jay's eyes were wet, her chin was wet, her cheeks burned hot, and she very much wanted to open her eyes. She didn't dare. She didn't want her make-believe, maybe real live angel lady to go away. She allowed herself to be lifted. She walked with her lady, her eyes squeezed tight like she was asleep but awake. The tall, thin, shimmering figure guided the tiny child up the ladder to the roof, where the dim ovular vehicle, glowing in reds, greens, and yellows, sat in silence, and 2 tall, thin figures stood alongside. Now italics. The winking, yellow and white lights of the city formed a soft background that night for the iridescent tableau in the center of the tar paper roof where I met my future. The familiar, strong, and tender hand on my back, the other on my shoulder, guided me toward the center of the roof, my hugging angel lady for real. I decided that this real, live lady wouldn't go away if I opened my eyes, so I did. I couldn't quite see my lady. Everything was wispy and blurry. But I did make out many shadows and 2 long, thin, wavering goblins vaguely lit by the moon glow and vibrating in rainbow colors brighter than the colors of my Crayola box. The air smelled like burnt toast or maybe burnt chocolate pudding. I didn't feel scared at all. The lady on the roof said there wasn't much time. There was some faint murmuring all around her. So these were the fire escape goblins, I thought. It would be just fine to be kidnapped by them, just as long as my angel lady came along with me. I think it was 10 years later, when I was 15, I admitted to Telmex just how much I cherished her hand on my back that night. We called it the roof moment. She said, "When I said there wasn't much time, we knew you had no conception of time as a dimension. Then we felt you struggling to understand our deeper meaning. It took us by surprise, and we giggled with delight. I was also very tense. You were my first recruit." I learned that Telmex had been a new mentor, so talented and dedicated that her research earned her the honor of being the youngest travel scout graduate ever assigned mission recruitment duty on a primitive planet. Because I was her first recruit, Telmex held me as special. I still feel that tingly glow when I think about our roof moment. Now there's still in italics, there's a footnote. My life partner, Scotty, crafted our recollections into Beyond the Horse's Eye by visiting and recording the virtual empath dream memories, I called them VE, dream memories, of everyone involved in the mission. In the tradition of the Amari, she then invited each, quote, character to use a VE viewer to enter and review the manuscript residing in one of her empath chambers. She printed out hard copies for the Earthlings who weren't yet empathically capable of entering someone else's chambers. My friend Katie was inspired to write her own chapter, and we pushed Scotty, who meticulously had kept her personal point of view out of the book, to do the same. Everyone else tweaked a fact here and there, but approved the work as is. As I revisited those times, I am almost 70 now, particularly the early years, I too was moved to add my reflections, which Scotty interspersed throughout. We decided to call her book science fiction, because if it were characterized as historical truth, all of us, and the work itself, would be retroswept into oblivion. That's the prologue.